Okay, welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials, every single one, in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
I'm feeling fantastic, buddy. Good vibes out here in the shadow of Mount Rainier.
Let's go.
On the edge of the Puget Sound. The coast of the Puget Sound? The edge of the Puget Sound? I don't know. Whatever it is. We're feeling good out here, and I think it is time for a celebratory beverage.
Let me hop on that ferry with you, buddy.
Let's go. See, you sound like a real Pacific Northwesterner. I don't even know if that's the right term. Who knows?
I fuck with the PNW.
It's nice out here. It is a balmy 68 degrees. I'm feeling good.
I like it. Yeah. We're at max heat, max humidity, Orlando, Florida. You know how we do. But it's nice and cool here. Monday evening after a pretty awesome Matchweek 17. I think between the Olympics and the Summer Cup, I think the players stayed pretty sharp out there.
It looked like it, man. Not much of a drop-off at all. I think fewer players rested than I expected. I mean, There were a good amount of players who didn't appear in some of those matches. I think Gotham rested some folks. San Diego Wave rested some folks. But other than that, across the league, the stars were out.
Yep. Gotham rested some folks, but they've got more folks waiting to take the place of those folks and some folks behind that as well. We'll get to that in a minute. A lot of football this weekend, man. Where do I get started?
Washington Spirit 4, Kansas City Current 1. I thought it was the biggest match of the weekend. Washington Spirit leapfrogs Kansas City on the table to take the second spot. They are 2 points ahead. They're 2 goals ahead in goal differential. I thought it was a thorough victory.
Yeah, it was a mashing. The Current got shots off.
Yep.
So they outshot the Spirit 14-7. And we got the very rare double leapfrog where they leapfrog them points and in goal differential.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned the shot disparity, but I think when you think about the shots that were on target, I think that's where kind of Washington really shined. Much more clinical.
Yep. 7
total for them, 5 on target. They notched the 4 goals. And it seemed like they came from a lot of different players, a lot of different directions.
Yeah, man, I think, they took advantage when Kansas City made some mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. So that's always a good sign. But then they're able to use their great skill across their roster, which I got to say, you drop Lacey Santos into an already great roster. There's no relief really anywhere on the pitch for any of their opponents.
Yeah, I was actually interested where they ended up playing. I think was a little bit of a mixed bag. But according to the starting lineup, to have Rodman technically in a midfield spot to make room for Bethune, Santos, and Sarr, that's insane. And I think Hirschfeld's on with them. And then Sullivan, center of the park, that's a nasty 6 to have to face. Yeah, so I mentioned it. Offensively, Washington looked very overpowering. Kansas City had a tough time dealing with that, especially, kind of in their own box. I think they were a little bit Swiss cheese back there.
A little bit.
What did you see during those moments when Washington was able to score?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I think you're right. I think Washington looked overpowering. They looked good, but there were some things that were just happening on the field that I thought were questionable from Kansas City in their midfield and their defense. And the first goal, Paige Metier, she gets the ball probably 7 or 8 yards on her side of the halfway line and just dribbles all the way pretty much unencumbered to the edge of the 18, gets the ball under her left foot and tucks it away. It was just like nobody's stepping up there. Like nobody's like rerouting her. Nobody's going after the ball there. Like I thought that was a pretty ugly look for the defense. And then unfortunately, I mean, you hate to see goals really scored this way. Maybe I'll rephrase that. I never really hate to see goals, but Michelle Cooper, an absolute howler, gives the ball to Croy Bethune. Maybe one of the last players in the league that you would want to just give the ball to. She streaks up midfield. She gives Oli Sarr, a little point and like, hey, over there. And then she dishes it perfectly. And Sarr makes the absolute perfect decision. Instead of going right onto the ball, she lets it roll like an extra couple feet to square herself to rip the shot. And there's just no chance for 80 Franch on that. I thought they left Franch exposed in multiple scenarios there. I know she, like every game score you're going to see, she has a terribly low score because you're a keeper and you let in 4 goals. But some of those, I don't know what she was expected to do about them.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both.
Sure.
I mean, I think she had a rough match, and but I think defensively they were just getting carved up back there. And I think on that play, on that Medier drive, I mean, imagine how many threatening players you have to account for,
right?
So it's almost like it might be our best option to just kind of like back off and make sure she can't lay it off for somebody for a tap in.
Yeah.
Turns out nothing defensively was going to work today for Kansas City. So Bethune's assist now puts her at 10. No one's ever had more assists in an NWSL season. Still 9 matches to play for Corey Bethune, a player, again, in her first professional season, playing in the best league in the world. Her team is very, very, very much in title contention. And yeah, that dime, I missed the point. Now I've got to go back and try to catch it. But the pass was an absolute dime. It's wild because you see that ball given away from Cooper. You don't always feel like this is definitely going to be a goal going the other way. Yeah. But Bethune and Sarr, and then just the execution just perfect. Like you mentioned, Sarr kind of waits, 2 changes of direction, like 2 little kind of like pivots as she's running.
Yep.
Then the wheel around to like just find herself pretty much by herself. She had 4 or 5 different places she could have put the ball. So yeah, can't really hang it on Franch. And the Spirit just looked. Let me ask you this, actually. Do you think it was more of an issue with Kansas City defensively, or do you think we're starting to see the Jonathan Heraldez effect in Washington? Because I do think some of those attacks felt a little European, I'll say. I think like the angles were interesting. They just seemed to continually catch the current in a state of confusion almost.
Are you positing the possibility that a Jonathan Heraldez coached team was slightly more prepared than a Vlatko Andonovski coach team?
And not in those exact terms.
Right.
But back to you. I asked you the question. What do you think?
That's fair. This is not a deposition. I think, I don't know, man, because some of those, like, and maybe I'm just being annoying here, and please sound off in the comments if you think I'm off on this, but that meta-year drive, you just can't allow that. You cannot allow, like, Cooper makes the pass. Fair. Cooper's 21 years old. I like her upside, physical player. I think she plays real tough. That kind of howler is going to happen to anybody. You can't fault her for that. You're good for one of those a season, probably. The meta-year drive, what are you doing? You can't let her go the length of the field without somebody stepping up. I think your point stands about you have to watch out for the other dangerous players, but there is a way to shade and just not let her have a free run on goal like that.
Yeah, totally. I think after KC's blazing hot start, I went back and checked. Their 8 matches so far this season against playoff teams. There are only 3 wins, 2 losses, 3 draws. Against the 8 playoff teams. 6 of their 9 remaining matches are against playoff teams. So, you could look at the Bia Zanerato injury. You can look at, hey, did this team beat up on, like sort of like the non-playoff teams? They clearly did. So that would put them at 12 points from 8 matches against playoff teams. Not terrible, but it's not the league leading crazy explosive, KC Current that I think we might have penciled them in as. I think it's going to be interesting. I think there's definitely some danger here the rest of the way for KC. The playoff picture is going to be pretty interesting. I think right now they're clumped up. There's like a 4-team clump at the top: Orlando, Washington, KC, Gotham, all within a 7-point band.
Yep. KC
clearly looks like the team that's like the most vulnerable to kind of slip and maybe lose that home field advantage in the first round.
I think so. I can see that. I mean, I guess out of that 4, it's not an insult to say you might be the most vulnerable out of those 4. They still have Chewinga. I don't think DiBernardo was like bad out there. Actually, let me answer it like this. So the Chewinga goal is her streaking up the middle of the field. Debinha plays a perfect pass. plays her right in, and she does exactly what she does with it.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, and we've talked about maybe if you don't have a bunch of other like changes of speed or a bunch of other looks that maybe you can get in trouble. The thing about that look for Kansas City is that works an awful lot. When you saw Chewinga like just shake off a defender to get to that Debinha pass, and it was night from there. That was a goal.
Oh yeah.
If you get one of those in the first 30 minutes of a playoff game or of an important match, then I think Kansas City is always going to be a live threat. So I think you're probably right. I guess out of those four, especially you think about Gotham, you think about Jessica Silva coming in, you think about now Jess Carter's going to get a little more acclimated with that team. Maybe I would say Kansas City Current the most vulnerable. You really got me thinking on this one because I don't want to say it because I just love their offense so much. But I think you might be right.
I mean, I think the Bia injury definitely hurts.
Yeah.
And then you look at their goals allowed, 26 on the season. That's good for 10th.
Yeah.
Out of 14 in a league where 8 make the playoffs. I mean, they will have the worst goals allowed number by a pretty good margin of all the playoff teams. All right, so before the Chewinga goal, this one goes to halftime 2-0. Washington obviously not done with the scoring. What'd you see in the second half?
So, I mean, they came out and the Spirit were firing again. We got to see Trinity Rodman do the thing. And I think she actually had to tell a reporter after the match, like, hey, by the way, I can shoot with my left. Nobody be surprised by this anymore. I don't think anybody should be after the Japan match in the Olympics where she scored that banger of a winner in side netting with her left foot. But now she just has this other weapon where you have to be terrified that she's going to fly down the right wing and serve in a perfect cross, or she's going to cut in, get the ball onto her left foot, and she can fire from there. Now, in this goal, I think this is another chance, and I think I've talked about it on the program before. I love Adie French. I thought she was a great second goalkeeper for Team USA for a few years there. So I'm in the tank for her. I just like French as a player in general. But, like, Rodman rips it with her left foot, and it takes a carom off the defender. And so I think it's one of those things where I think it's bad luck for French, but I don't think it's a lucky goal by Rodman, if that makes any sense, is that she created that luck off that bounce with that rocket off her left foot. But at that point, it's 3-0. You're 51 minutes into that, and you could see the slumping of shoulders in Kansas City. It was game over from there, it felt like.
Yeah, totally agree. I think Trinity Rodman's game just keeps adding pieces to it, adding ways to be threatening. It just seems to be happening over the course of weeks now, like where it's like, oh, now new wrinkle to the game.
Yeah.
Teetering dangerously close to like one person offense kind of territory. Like when she's got the ball, it's just like, okay, this could just be something. I agree with you though, not on French, but I also still continue to believe that she did not have a good game. Definitely not her best game. But again, I think the whole defensive setup probably needs a little bit of a reassessment. 74th minute though, Lacey Santos, her first NWSL regular season appearance. I love when you see a player with the confidence and the IQ to just, there's no wasted movement. It's just like, I'm going to go through this whole sequence, pop, pop, pop. And then it's just like beautifully executed.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, and credit to Gabby Carl, who runs on to Michelle Cooper. Again, not a banner day for Cooper, but that's going to happen to every young player. Gabby Carl runs on to her, takes the ball right off her. It's a good pass. It's not a great pass. There is still work for Lacey Santos to do, to your point. No wasted movement, gets the shot off. One appearance in the NWSL, one goal in the NWSL. Not a bad day's work.
The most interesting part about it for me was like, this was the marquee matchup of the weekend. Mm-hmm. And I think this has happened a couple times this season where it feels like this is going to be like a knockdown drag out, but just to see Washington lay it on KC like this, and then to kind of rehash where the Current have been against playoff teams, I think it's definitely going to be something to watch. I think very clearly, in my view, we've got Washington Spirit with the up arrow next to their name and KC Current with probably the down arrow next to their name at this point.
I think so. I don't know. You got some takes here, buddy. This feels a little strong. I think, you're probably not going to get another, like Labonta was fine. DiBernardo was fine. Probably could have been better. Claire Hutton was fine. Like, I think a lot of times that midfield, I think they're going to have more impact on matches, but you raise some compelling numbers, obviously, with these matches against playoff caliber teams. So I think it's totally fair for you to raise these concerns. And maybe, let me know. Maybe I'm just being a coward. I'm not ready to say the arrow's all the way down. Can the arrow be sideways before it goes down for Kansas City?
I think so. Yeah. Kind of like a little veering off to the right or so that could work.
Right.
But, KC, 6 goals allowed in their last 2 matches, 2 losses in a row.
Great.
I think the Bia injury.
Yeah.
I think that's going to end up being one of the injuries, I think, of the season because that team was flying so high. I'd love to be kind of proven wrong, but I don't know. I'm going to get out ahead of this one a little bit early. I think the Current are in that potentially maybe one and done this playoffs.
He's going all in. All right.
Especially as we've talked about some of these teams that might be coming up. Wait till I get to Racing Louisville. I've got some takes there. Well, that's coming up right now. But before we get there, let's talk a little Orlando Pride. The league leaders, they win one of those matches at Houston that's a little bit ugly, but you see championship level teams kind of pull these games out just with a couple moments of quality. I think Houston looked very, very threatening late, but it ends 1-0. Angelina to Summer Yates in the 67th to put Orlando on the board. And the Orlando Pride, 17 matches unbeaten. Longest streak in NWSL history. They've now won 4 in a row. That is after their 8-match win streak a little bit earlier this season. So they've definitely got something going. What'd you see in this one?
The best team in the league plays in your city.
Let's go.
That's undeniable. I think the double is on. I think I mentioned it in the last show. I think they're a real threat to win the Shield and win the title. This is you could just make fun of me for this very, very basic analysis. Everything their players do is like really good. like Marta hit a corner kick and it looked like just a missile, like right into the danger area, right for it didn't end with a goal, but it was just like, that's a great corner kick. Mm-hmm. And then you just see all these moments. Is there anybody better in the world at creating separation from a defender than Barbara Benda? I don't think there is a single player.
I don't think so either. I mean, she's so smart. Athletically, she's a freak.
Yeah. And
her ball skills are incredible. And they've actually come a long way in the last 12 plus months, maybe going back to the 23 World Cup. In that World Cup and during the lead up, she was more of a runner-gunner type player.
Sure.
But now she's got some playmaking. She's notching assists during the season. She's manipulating space a little bit better, creating space for some of the other attackers. She knows exactly what to do to kind of get you on your heels, open up space, and give herself a lane to run. It's pretty uncanny.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, I think it felt like there were at least 5 instances in the first 60 minutes of that match where she's shoulder to shoulder with the defender, and then she'll be on the ball. And that's the most amazing part to me, is that she'll be on the ball and then she'll still get a step or two on you. It's you're not supposed to be able to outrun somebody when you're kicking a football and they are not. And they're chasing you. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And she just shakes defenders off her. She looks like Marshawn Lynch out there, just get off me. And then players are falling off of her as she's making her way toward the goal. More to my all your players do really good things point. Angelina and Julie Doyle's passing, it's just great pass, constantly on point, hit him in stride. It's perfectly timed. It's at the right angle. And then the defense, the opponent so rarely gets to any spot that they want to be in. You saw it when they beat Kansas City. Speaking of Kansas City, whatever way the arrow was facing, Kansas City, they were just never in a comfortable position to really get any kind of strong attacking looks. And on the last thing that I'll say on this, Anna Morehouse is announcing herself as one of the best keepers in the league.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, because it's not just the defense. I think the defense is great. To me, it's Strom and Sams are the cornerstones, the 2 center backs.
Yeah.
Abello is a tremendous luxury to have because she's just flying up and down the field, defensively rock solid, offensively always hungry. It's just a great player to watch. And then I think the 2 kind of defensive-ish midfielders, Haley McCutcheon and Angelina, I mean, they're incredible as well. It's just so tough to find space amongst that team. Houston had chances late, as mentioned, but that Orlando Pride defense holds up. And then Angelina the ball to Summer Yates, it was a perfect example of like defense into offense. That's the other thing. I think defensively they're great, but still offensive minded. No Rafaela in this game. It's another great player that I think
she might help when she comes back.
Yeah, just roll out here. I think she's still maybe just lost one match this calendar year that she's appeared in, if I remember correctly. I joked about it early in the season. At what point do you think Seb Hines has thought we might go undefeated here?
Ooh, surely he's thought about it. He'll never tell a soul outside of that building who he absolutely trusts. But of course he's thought about it. I mean, they didn't even lose in the Summer Cup. They had to lose, and it took PKs to beat them there. They have a couple of big tests coming up, but are we looking at the Orlando Invincibles? I think it's on the board.
It's not on the board, I'll tell you that. So they've got a couple tests looming here. They've got Gotham coming to town. I'm going to try to be in the building for that one.
Nice.
And, I'm going to just see if I could get a hold of Seb's feet, put him to the fire a little bit, ask him when the first time was. He had the thought of Orlando going undefeated. I'm going to ask him if I get the chance. You already know.
I love the framing, too, of just asking, like, assuming it. When's the first time that you thought this? For him to be like, no, I've never considered it. Like, don't lie to me, Seb.
I'm definitely asking. So they got Gotham at home. They go at Chicago, play the Red Stars, and then they have the KC Current, whose arrow's pointing in some direction. We're not sure.
Right.
I think those will be 3 tough tests in the next 3. Oh, yeah. Either way, they do still have a 4-point lead and a 4-goal differential lead over the Washington Spirit. I love when the cushion is more than a team could give up in a weekend.
Yes.
Because you could have, a nightmare of a game, and you got a whole week to kind of like brush it off, develop a little bit of short-term amnesia, right the ship a little bit. So that 4-point cushion, I think, is going to really come into handy here. Still just 2/3 of the way through the season. A lot of football left.
65.384% through the season. So I don't know. I mean, we're getting there. At Chicago is going to be interesting. You're at Portland on October 11th. Tough stretch. You host the Washington Spirit on October 6th, and then you go to Portland on October 11th. That's going to be a tricky one. You're going to have to show off the depth in that 2-game stretch for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I do think depth is going to be the story of the last third of the season here. I think we're starting to see some of the teams getting some of their players back from the Olympics, rounding into shape a little bit. We saw a little preview of that this weekend, but I do want to scoot ahead. You were in the building, along with the legend, in Seattle, Lumen Field. Seattle 1, North Carolina Courage 0. Take it away. What'd you see in this one?
Let's start with some stats. So obviously, Megan Rapinoe's number 15 jersey was retired in a pre-match ceremony. I thought just kind of like journalism neutral here. Like, shout out to the communications team for Seattle Reign Football Club. I thought they did a really nice job. I thought the color scheme was cool. The setup was classy. The videos were good. They had people like parachuting into the stadium. I don't know if they showed that on the broadcast, but like, I will tell you, if somebody comes parachuting into the stadium, legit startled me a little bit for like a half second. Like, they had this giant yellow parachute, and I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Because this is America, so you never know what's happening. But yeah, so I thought the whole ceremony, I thought it was really, really well done. But as I was sitting in the press box before the match, just kind of thinking about, they're showing like Rapinoe stuff on the board and all this stuff, and I was just like, we really witnessed an all-timer. And I know that's easy to say, but I started by thinking about, let's just think about her 2019, just in isolation. She leads the team to win the World Cup. She wins the Ballon d'Or. She wins the World Cup Golden Ball. She is on the World Cup All-Star team. She's in the FIFA Pro World 11, and she won FIFA Best Women's Player, all in one season. That is like... In comparison, and I'm not comparing these two players, but in comparison, that's Bonmati last year. But I would also say that Bonmati won the Champions League and won the league in that 2023 season as well. But I mean, that absolutely stands alone. And I know it's not a statistic, but in 2019, she has the iconic celebration. She has the goal. She's the face of the national team. I also tweeted the video of her kind of scoffing at the idea before the tournament, saying, and I quote, "We're not going to the fucking White House," end quote. Were they to win?
Legend.
And it just all adds to it. I mean, she stands for the right things. And that 2019 is it's an all-time year for any athlete, really.
Perfectly said. She's just a legend.
Yeah.
And I think it's great to see that pinnacle, reached in a year where you can sort of say this was like the absolute apex of a great career. I'm genuinely curious about this because usually I see these from the comfort of my own home watching on TV. Was there a boost energy wise? Obviously, sometimes there's a buzz in the crowd. Did you see any of that? And then did you see any of that spill onto the field and the players? Like, was there an extra level, being hit at a fifth or sixth gear?
I think so. I think, and not even in hindsight, like the place was electric. Like it was the second highest attendance for a regular season standalone match in the history of the club.
Nice.
And Laura Harvey, and it's been a rough season for Seattle Reign. And Laura Harvey has talked about in press conference after press conference after press conference, the team hasn't shown enough quality in the final third, whether it's the last pass, the shot, anything like that. She has harped on that time and time again. And I mean, you remember a few months back, pre-Olympics, and I had asked her at the press conference, is that something you're going to need to address in the transfer window? And she succinctly said, yes, end quote. And they did. And so they added Swiss attacker Anna Maria Crnogorcevic, who, spent a season at Barcelona a couple years back, previously with the Portland Thorns, had a year at Atletico as well. She's on the field, and it's like, okay, this is a player who makes good decisions, has a good first touch, and just plays with a level of quality that was kind of lacking on the wing for this squad for good stretches of the season. So some of it was the electricity, some of it was the atmosphere, but I also think that they just had some better players on the pitch.
Yeah, I think you definitely noticed that she took routes that were, I think, a little bit more direct than I'm used to seeing the Reign attackers, just to be like, I'm just going to go straight to the goal. I thought G had a great game. Obviously she was pretty close to a couple wondrous finishes.
That back heel.
Yeah, that was nasty. We had also talked too about, Seattle's inability before this one to turn a draw into a win, or to turn a loss, into a win. A couple extra steps there to make that happen. But it was kind of cool to see that happen in this one. And then Emeri Adames, a player that you'd brought up on more than one occasion on the show, makes it happen late. Pretty legendary Selly too. I think that one goes into a really, really fun moment. What'd you see there?
I mean, I think really what happened, and Laura Harvey touched on this in the press conference, the Courage had 61% of the ball in the first half. And, it was more Reign FC struggle ball, and it was kind of like, okay, we're going to play this counterattacking style. But even then, it wasn't full-on struggle ball because I think even with the Courage having the lion's share of possession, it still felt like Reign had kind of the better chances.
Yep.
I do want to shout out Courtney Vine, and North Carolina Courage's manager, Sean Nahas, clearly was like, all right, Courtney, you're here now. So we're going to try to give you the ball as many times as possible in the first 15 minutes of your first NWSL match. And Shea Holmes, left back for the Reign, really had to compete with Vine in a lot of different chances. But what happened, and what Harvey touched on in the press conference, was after about the 50th minute, she had said they discussed this at halftime, Seattle just committed to holding the ball a little more. And you could tell that was making the Courage more uncomfortable. So they ended up finishing 55-45 in possession. Wow. And that's because Seattle ended up getting it to like 50-50 in the second half. And you could just tell that was really frustrating the hell out of the Courage players. And at the 75th minute, Seattle brings on Jalen Howell and Nerilia Mondesir, 2 more additions that they just made. And they looked good right away. The attack was ratcheted up. The pressure was ratcheted up. Jalen Howell was like pumping up the crowd, like telling people to get louder after she was making plays.
I love Howell.
She looked immediately comfortable. And Mondesir, I got more on Mondesir later, but they ratcheted up the pressure, and the header was good from Emeri Adames. I thought it was well placed. It didn't have a ton of pace to it, but she places it perfectly. And, you hate to see that for Casey Murphy, who's obviously an excellent goalkeeper. She kind of bats it around a little bit. It goes in and ends up being charged as an own goal against Casey Murphy. But honestly, if you're not going to give that goal to Emeri Adames, then I think you should just give that goal to the Cosmos, because that was just that was written in the stars, as our guy Chris Sharples would say. Like she, like you said, she goes and hits the celly. Earlier that day, she tweeted a photograph of her from like 10 years ago at a training session where she got a photo with Megan Rapinoe. And mind you, what Adames was talking about in the press conference, a photo from 10 years ago, she said about 10 years ago, for Emeri Adames means she was roughly 8 years old around that time. So it's her favorite player. It's her idol. She scores the winning goal at the death and then hits her idol's celly in front of the home crowd with the place just going absolutely bananas. I mean, you couldn't write that stuff.
Incredible. Glad you were in the building to take it all in. I thought it was a great point what you mentioned about the courage and the possession disparity between the first and second half. 61% in the first half. That's courage ball right there.
Yep.
And I was going to ask you what wasn't going right for the courage, but I think you kind of nailed it with just like, hey, let's not let them have the ball right away. Let's not let them control the ball. Let's not chase them around for another minute more than we need to.
Yep.
Was there anything else you saw that kind of had that team kind of stalling out, or anywhere else where you thought they were missing something that because they had to have been looking at this match, Megan Rapinoe celebration stuff aside, as probably like a match where they expected a result.
Sure.
Maybe kind of we're going to come in and say, hey, we think we can win this one. What else did you see that was lacking from that North Carolina side?
I think they're good players like Matsukubo, Ashley Sanchez. They just couldn't find any joy in the middle of the field. And, when you put G out there and then you have Srna Gorcevic up front, who's able to maybe track back, and she was playing in the middle of the park for some stretches. Then you have Quinn and Fishlock, who are able to you have two really smart, really versatile defensive midfielders out there. And they are flanked by, I mentioned Shea Holmes playing well, Phoebe McClernand, Jordyn Bugg, who I want to make special mention of here, another 18-year-old young player. And then Sofia Huerta, you already know what time it is with Huerta. She's going to get hers. She's going to create pressure. But both Jess Fishlock and Laura Harvey would not stop talking about Jordyn Bugg, 18-year-old center back defender. She comes out there. I think it's her first start for the club, at least in league play, as far as I remember. And she goes out there as a center back pairing with Phoebe McClernand. And there were multiple moments where the Courage were on the attack and Bugg was just dispossessing players or forcing them away from the goal.
Wow.
And I will say, I don't have the entire quote, but Laura Harvey did say, and I know she used this exact term, that Jordyn Bugg's ceiling is, quote, world class. Like she thinks this is a player who is going to ascend to the national team, who is going to be one of the better defenders in the world. And like Fishlock was gushing over Bugg's play. And I think they just made it really tough. The Courage couldn't do anything in the middle of the field. And when you talk about their kind of possessing style, they were just getting frustrated as the game went on.
Incredible. I mean, it's already got under 16, under 17, under 19, under 20 U.S. experience. Mm-hmm. So that's a player that's definitely on track. Somebody to keep an eye on for sure. Anything else you want to hit before we hop off Seattle Courage?
Yeah, the last thing I want to hit real quick, Nuria Mondesir. I mentioned she came on in the 75th minute. Haitian forward, spent the last few seasons at Montpellier. Immediately changed the dynamic of the attack. I thought it was really interesting. I asked about her in the post-game press conference. I asked about Howell and Mondesir. And Laura Harvey pointed out that Mondesir has not had to play as physical a style of play as she's going to encounter in the NWSL. And she wasn't like bashing her or whatever. She was just like, they just play a different style over there.
Yeah.
She made it pretty clear in the way she was discussing it that she's going to have to bring Mondesir along through minute increments at a time. So I think a lot of Reign fans are excited about her scoring ability and her speed and strength, and clearly a very, very clever and creative player out there. She was immediately kind of confusing Courage defenders as soon as she got on the pitch. I think it's going to take a little while to kind of develop her to play this style of football, but absolutely looks like, I know, we're 20 minutes in if you count stoppage time for Mondesir playing, but seems like a pretty smart pickup.
I would say so. She looked really good. I've been very surprised this season. Usually, like when you watch, I mean, I'm probably like showing a little bit of regular American sports bias here, but usually when you watch the NFL or the NBA, it definitely is a war of attrition.
Yeah.
It feels like the NWSL is going the opposite direction. It feels like there's somehow more talent on the field. The talent pool just seems to be growing over the course of just this season. Even with the injuries, I mean, we're seeing players come in. We're seeing young players kind of like start to get their playing time. They're months into their professional career if this is their first season.
Yeah.
They've got experience. They've developed a little bit of chemistry. And now we're starting to see like a lot of these players kind of bubble up here and sort of tip the league a little bit, in terms of being able to have an impact. This one obviously decided by Adames and Mondesir's impact as well. And this was just a couple months after, you sort of lamenting the lack of like young talent or maybe opportunity for some of these young players. And now this team is maybe on track to, I'm not sure if this season is still like necessarily on the table, but all of a sudden now the future of this team looks a whole lot different, probably feels a whole lot different than it did.
100%. And one of the last thing I'll say is, in the press conference, when I talked to Jess Fishlock, I asked her about Jalen Howell and mentioning, so, okay, now you bring Howell in, and now you have a trio of Quinn, Fishlock, and Howell as three kind of defensive-minded, versatile midfielders. Mm-hmm. And Fishlock, as she often does, kind of made sure to slide in a joke there and was like, I'm not getting any younger. And Jalen Howell's 24. And so she was very forthright about saying, I understand Jalen's going to help us win matches this year. That's also a move for the future of the club. So I think you're spot on. Mondesir's 25. And then we talked about Bugg and Adames. They're 18. This is a transitional period. Like Lou Barnes is eventually going to retire. Jess Fishlock is going to retire. Quinn is progressing that way in their career. So you have to plan for that future. One more last thing that I want to say. This was Laura Harvey's 100th win, and Jess Fishlock said something I thought was really great. Harvey's the all-time winningest coach in the history of NWSL league play, and she said it makes sense that Adames scores the winner because that's a player who Laura Harvey pictured and said, okay, you could help be the future of this club. And so for her to, on the night that you retire Megan Rapinoe's jersey, now you have this player who looks to be a main fixture of the future, scores the winner. Jess Fishlock said she doesn't believe in coincidences. And so, again, she believes the Cosmos was in play there.
Let's go. Nice Pele throwback, too, with the Cosmos.
Nice.
I want to bounce around the league. 4 matches that we didn't hit yet. We're not going to dive too deep into these, but saw some fun stuff. Let's get started with Gotham Portland. A shot on target advantage for Gotham, 9-3 over Portland. Jackie Oatley, championship form, just
always
glorious on that. I mean, it's just, I'm not sure how somebody's voice can elevate a sporting event to that level. I mean, to the Goatley, please come on the show. We need the ITC pod to get elevated just as much as one of these random August matches in the NWSL. So obviously the door's always open. But zooming out, Gotham, another big win over another real playoff team. Did you pick up anything from this one?
They had a bit of a slow start to the season, but as things have progressed, I know we focus on a lot of their U.S. women's national team players. Turns out Yasmin Ryan is really good. Brunini is really good. Ella Stevens is really good. They just have talent all over the field. They can beat you 100 different ways. I think I referenced quickly in passing the Jess Carter acquisition, the Jessica Silva acquisition. They made the right move, obviously, in bringing in on Katrin Berger. This could be one of those teams that they start to peak at the right time. But luckily for them, I don't think they've peaked yet. I just think they're kind of, if we're talking about arrows, seems like that arrow is definitely going up.
Yeah, I think looking at Gotham, looking at Washington, those are the 2 scariest teams, I think, for Orlando. They have more firepower. I think both of those teams, they do have more productive firepower. Like, I think Orlando as a whole, especially when you include the coaching and like what they're doing on the pitch, I think still is the best team. But wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if one of these teams kind of knocks them off, come playoff time, second round, or the final. I mean, it's a quick turnaround, so you got to win 3 to kind of take the whole thing. And then as soon as you get to the semis, I mean, it's all heavyweights at that point. So I was pretty impressed with Gotham. I'm glad you mentioned Yasmin Ryan. Her goal, like the one hop screamer,
come on,
that never rises more than 18 inches off the ground, but somehow only bounces once between the time she kicks it, and it almost blows the hole through the net. Just incredible. She was awesome. Bruninha was dealing as well. They've just got so much talent.
Yeah, I mean, and then when it comes to playoff time, and we've talked about this and it happens in other sports, and I know they've turned over the roster a little bit, they get to playoff time, a lot of the players in that locker room are going to look around and say, we know how to do this.
100%. Yeah, definitely going to be a team to watch. Let's go cross country and head to a place where everything's totally normal. San Diego Wave.
It's fine.
Drop a close one, 2-1, Angel City. Not a whole lot to see here. Just a football game with not a ton of storylines. What'd you see in this one?
Alyssa Thompson looked great. I thought it's the best match I've ever seen her play at the professional level or at the international level. It has a brace.
Real quick, big difference between Alyssa Thompson's XG and real G. 0.6 XG for Alyssa, 2 real G for Alyssa, gets the brace. And I mean, I don't know, case in point, the magic is the delta between the real G and the XG.
100%. I mean, she was a real G out there. Brace in the first half, getting it done. And it just felt like it was pretty much over after that first half brace. I will say, though, things did change. Look at the San Diego Wave. They brought on this plucky youngster, making her NWSL debut. Oh, Delphine Cascarino. Turns out extremely good at football.
Yep. She's rocking the historic number 69 jersey. Made Gronk laugh somewhere.
Sure.
And apologies to Asil. Delphine didn't make our best
unbelievable.
Our best said transfers. Made our honorable mentions. So yeah. Our apologies to Delphine. She looked awesome. I think she's going to fit in pretty nicely in this NWSL.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, she has her head up. She has her eyes on goal. She gets to her spots. She's going to fire shots whenever she needs to. She's going to fit, like you said, right into the style of play. You know, she's going to have some obstacles to overcome for that squad. They look a little listless right now, but there is still a lot of talent on there. So we'll see how it goes moving forward.
Yeah, didn't like the body language one bit.
No.
From the old Wave. They're currently way outside the playoff mix. I think what's happening with the playoffs is pretty interesting because I think the 8 that are in the slots, I don't know why, but in my mind, it feels like these are the 8 that are going to make the playoffs, even though I know probabilistically we're probably going to see some upsies and downsies. But we've got Orlando, Washington, KC, Gotham as the top 4. Those are absolute locks already.
Look like it.
Then it's Portland, the Courage, the Red Stars, Racing Louisville, who we'll talk about here in a minute. And then outside looking in, you got Angel City, Bay FC, San Diego, Seattle, Houston, and Utah. Those 6 feel like the right 6 to be on the outside looking in. Do you expect any kind of like shakeup near the bottom? I think the Racing, they're a point ahead of both Angel City and Bay FC. Pretty healthy goal differential advantage. But how do you see the bottom of the playoff mix kind of shaking out?
I think that's one of my favorite things about football is that I think the goal differential tells a real story in how to judge who like the realistic contenders are.
Yep.
Not always. It's not a perfect system. It's not a perfect indicator. Nothing really is. But, you know, Angel City -9, even though they're only 1 point behind Racing Louisville, and Louisville is, you know, +1 in goal differential. Racing has 7 draws. Of course, they're going to have a pretty good goal differential when they're constantly drawing like that. But I think that's about right. I think if one team were to bubble up, you had mentioned Bay FC. Now they're -10 in the goal differential. You know, I'm not selling my Oshuala and Kundanaji stock just yet. I think if they can kind of correct some of that goal differential, they have a big match coming up against Portland that I think is going to have a lot to say about that playoff race. And Racing has to play Seattle Reign next. So you could hear, kind of walking outside of the stadium, okay, Seattle Reign, they're 5 points back. 5 points back in the playoff, and they play Louisville next week. So that could be a potential 6-point swing. But that would have Seattle Reign winning in Kentucky. And I don't know. That seems like a tall order.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah.
Louisville looked pretty impressive, I'll say, against Chicago. Yeah. No Swanson, no Ludmila for Chicago, who had no real bite to their offense in this one. They dropped one hard, I think, to Louisville 3-1. They didn't look particularly threatening in this one. We've seen Chicago kind of stall out, especially without Swanson. But all of a sudden, you look at that Louisville starting lineup. Canu, Balser, Adi Borges, Taylor Flint, DeMello, Marissa DeGrande, who scored. They bring Emma Sears and Janine Becky off the bench. Kayla Fisher off the bench, who scores as well. That's a real team. At home, it's a live environment. So, you're not just going to roll in there and kind of beat up on them. I kind of like this Louisville team. I think if I'm looking at a team that might fall out of the 8, I wonder if Chicago could maybe be more likely. We've talked about they just didn't look great. And I think they're so dependent on the forwards there. You lose Sam Staub. Alyssa Nair is just, I don't know, for some reason she's like a different player in the NWSL than she does when she's wearing the USWNT kit. I'm going to drop a little take chip on that too. I think I would maybe not be so surprised if Louisville finishes the season ahead of Chicago, and then whatever playoff implications come along with that.
I like it. I like the boldness of the take, and I think it's realistic as well. I mean, as they started wheeling and dealing, Racing sends Carson Pickett down to you in Orlando. Mm-hmm. They send Jalen Howell over to me in Seattle. They acquire Bethany Balser. Like you had mentioned, Sears and Becky kind of coming into the squad. It felt like some of also Twitter were like, "What are they doing? What's happening at Racing Louisville? Like, why did they feel the need to shake the snow globe so vigorously?" I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm glad you mentioned the Balser-Kanu pairing. I think that could be really, really interesting with Artie Borges in there as well. They just play with a level of toughness and smarts. I think Savannah DeMello brings a lot of that in her game. She had a rough spot in the 2023 World Cup, and she drew the ire of some folks. She was not really set up for success in that kind of situation, but I think they have a mental toughness to the way they play. They have an intelligence to the way they play. Their players were joking about it on Twitter after the match. Like, one of their goals, I think maybe all 10 players on the pitch touch the ball, and they're just like, we play team football here. Like, let's go. This is how we play now. They're absolutely going to be an interesting team to watch moving forward. And that's after a season of already being an interesting team to watch before they shook the snow globe the way they did.
Definitely be watching them. Now I'm kind of hoping that we don't get Orlando Louisville first round matchup. I don't want those problems. Not problems. I just don't, the problems of the heart, we'll say.
Yeah, Barbara Bond.
Last match to hit. Utah Royals 2, Bay FC 1. Bay FC continues. We talked about the Invincibles. They are the undrawables in Bay FC.
That's right.
They have yet to find the draw this season. 20 goals for, 30 goals allowed. Cool -10, 6 wins, 11 losses for Bay FC. I thought Utah, I continue to think that what they're doing is going to pay some dividends here. Maybe we're a year away from being a year away, but the Mina Tanaka signing, we didn't mention on the show, but what a fit there. I mean,
yeah,
great player. It's kind of like exactly what they needed. Ali Sentinor continues to just dazzle. Her ball skills, her single-mindedness around, I'm going to create an opportunity for myself and I'm going to let this shit rip. It's a thing of absolute beauty.
Yeah. 100%. That's a good call. I'm starting to kind of back off maybe Bay FC could sneak in there. That defense is having a rough go of it. I think you're spot on there. Obviously, Tanaka, great addition. And then I know you had shouted her out in the transfer episode when we were talking about Real Madrid. Utah acquires Claudia Zornoza, 33-year-old with experience, with Champions League experience. It's just it's smart management when you see teams, and you see NBA teams do it a lot, where it's just okay, let's get another adult, a full-blown adult in this locker room, on the pitch, in kind of when you start to hit maybe scary hours a little bit on there. I don't think Utah is going to make a huge charge, but I think they set themselves up to continue establishing a culture and just get some more pros around Ali Sentinor to be okay, you very clearly already have your stuff together, but we're going to do everything we can to shepherd you into helping you turn into the world-class player we think you can be.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you mentioned the getting some adults on the roster.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't always work, but I know for sure that when you don't have the adults, it almost never works.
That's a good point, yeah.
You see this in sports for sure all the time. Chloe Lacasse, who we mentioned on the show, another addition. Amandine Henry, they obviously added her earlier this season. So I think they're definitely committed. And it's weird. They play a good brand of football. Yeah. They just don't really have the talent. And if I were a fan of Utah, I would be ecstatic, because that's what you want to see, especially from an expansion team. You want to see the building of an identity. You want to see some cohesion. I'd be excited to be a Royals fan at this point. And then you have, a supernova of your own that, sky's the limit for a player like Sentinor.
100%. And I'm gonna operate. Admittedly, I'll raise my hand. I know we have a lot of friends of the program who like different sports, so I've only seen this in passing. I saw on Twitter there was like a clip of Nick Saban. He was talking on Hard Knocks, and I think he was talking about Caleb Williams, quarterback for the Bears. Mm-hmm. And Nick Saban said something to the effect of, "The number one killer of young quarterbacks is expectations, like unrealistic expectations for a quarterback." And I'm like, as a dude who grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and forced to watch a lot of Cleveland Browns football, I'm pretty sure the number one killer of quarterbacks is a terrible offensive line. And it doesn't have anything to do with media expectations. Like, I'm pretty confident terrible management and a bad O-line is what does it. So this long analogy is basically, if you're a Royals fan, like you said, your management appears to be making good decisions to put good pros around your young star player. That is a hell of a lot more than other franchises do to set up their young stars. And like you said, I think they should be super psyched about it. It might not yield the results this year. I think it pays dividends down the road.
Totally agree. Yep. Something that we'll continue to monitor. Quick programming reminder. Next episode, we're going to drop our 2024-2025 UEFA Women's Champions League preview. The action kicks back off next Wednesday, September 4th. A lot of UWCL teams back in action then. So we got to get to the preview before we get there. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
That's it. Like you said, great week of NWSL football. Great return for the league. Just all across the board. And I'm looking forward to watching more. I'm also ready for that Champions League to return as well, though.
Let's go. All the football. Just heap it on top of us. We're ready for it. All right, man. I think we did it. It's been another episode of Into the Channel. Sincere thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, just plain hanging out with your boys. And remember to like if you liked, and subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grant Engel. All rest, no rust. You already know what time it is. Match week 17 in the books. Champions League right around the corner. I appreciate you, man. Nobody else I'd rather do it with.
Likewise, buddy. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Let me just also say to great friend of the program, at Shark Eats Kitten on Twitter. Hilarious Twitter handle. Rest assured, the shadow executive producer of this show got her bucket hat from the Rapinoe retirement match. So we're good to go there. It's a good looking bucket hat, reversible, light purple on one side, black on one side. So we're out here doing things, doing what we got to do. Thank you again to everybody who's checking us out, and we will talk to you next time.